This is all run from Tehran. It's way too big for Sinwar to work such a huge operation. Now, here's come the ingenuity of Hamas in directing much of the Israeli anger against the government. And this is pure gold psychological warfare strategy. Okay? And this is how you win a war. This is the summit, the acme of psychological warfare. To do what your enemy is forcing you to do, even though you know it's against your own better interest.
Welcome to another episode of the Caroline Glick Show. One of the leitmotifs, really, of our lifetime is psychological warfare. The whole doctrine of terrorism uses it. Much of the media use it. Different political factions in various countries use it as a strategy for building their camp and maintaining them. And all of this today is playing out in the reality that Israelis live in. When we saw last week with the execution of the 6 hostages by Hamas, and then after they killed them, they posted these pre-execution pleas by the 6 hostages that were murdered for their lives, we saw unrolling right before our eyes a classic example of psychological warfare that was meant to use the murder and then the after effects of the murder, that is the videos, as a means to produce an outcome politically by Israel, which is, of course, capitulation. So when I was watching this unfold, I thought to myself, now I want to talk to my friend, Dr. Ron Schleifer. Ron Schleifer is the director of the, he's a psychological warfare analyst, and he's a director of the School of Communications at Ariel University. And I've had many conversations with Ron about political warfare in the past. He just came out with a new book. And so I was very glad that Ron could make it today to the Caroline Glick Show. So first of all, I want to welcome you to the show, Ron. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, actually, I should call you Dr. Schleifer.
Ron is up there.
Well, I'll call you Ron, but you guys should know he's Dr. Ron Schleifer, and you should read his books, of which there are many, and just go through some of the titles before we start. You have a new one out in Hebrew called Post-Psychological Warfare. And then your previous titles in English include Foreign Media Coverage of Israel, Psychological Warfare 101, Psychological Warfare in the First Intifada, and Psychological Warfare in the Middle East Conflict. So you've been kind of focused on this for a while. So first, before we begin, can you just sort of give us a primer on what is psychological warfare for the uninitiated?
Okay, there are three versions. I'll give it the short version. Is the art and science of how to make your own soldiers patriotic, while how you make the enemy soldiers pacifists. Okay. So this is it's a very narrow definition. If it's more, if I'd say the nonviolent means deployed during wartime in order to assist the victory, basically using psychology to persuade the enemy to do what you want them to do. Like, if you don't have the weapons as many or as strong or as much as the enemy has, persuade them not to use it, okay? Because basically any weapon has a trigger or an operation button. So you can either destroy the weapon or persuade the soldier who is holding the weapon not to pull the trigger, which is the same effect. Right. But much less violent and much less destructive, and with tremendous successes. And this is the more narrow. If you want to broaden a little bit, is the use of public relations techniques during wartime in order to enhance your chances of winning.
So, I mean, with Israel. With all armies, part of it is really the motivation, the morale of your soldiers and your home front. and and that's reasonable. That's what everybody does when they're feeling patriotic, and they are patriotic, and they feel like this war is very important for their nation. There's nothing too manipulative about that, I think. Although, I guess if you're fighting an imperialist war and you want to repress people who never did anything to you in order to take their riches and plunder them or something, I guess that you could call that manipulation. I guess there's manipulation in everything. But on the other hand, there's sort of light manipulation, and then there's sort of insidious and evil manipulation.
Manipulation is a manipulation. The question is, we don't want to say, like the Marxists, that everything is a struggle. So this is why I limit it to a framework of war. Now, there's also war between the sexes, or war between employers and classes.
War between races.
Yeah, that's too broad. And if it's too broad, it's ineffective. War is where violence is deployed, in the most basic concept of war, where violence is deployed in order to create pain on the enemy until it surrenders. Okay? Now the question is, how can you use psychology in order to promote your goals? So this is psychological warfare, and it has to be nonviolent.
So when we talk about Israel, I think, you can see Israel getting it from all sides.
Yes.
But before we talk about Israel specifically, I want to talk a little bit about the doctrine of terrorism, because in my mind, and we were talking about it a little bit before we started filming, I said that psychological warfare is a central component, and you corrected me. You gave a more nuanced definition of what the role of psychological warfare is in terrorist warfare.
Yes, well, is not terrorist warfare. Terrorism is just one stage during war. Let's take the example of Vietnam. Okay. Because we'll get back to it later, because it's very important to how the PLO went in the business of psychological warfare.
This Viet Cong actually taught the PLO how to do it, is what I understood. That
they learned it.
Went to Hanoi. And
they learned how to do it, and they deployed that, and they deploy it to this day. Okay, let's start with Vietnam. The Vietnamese were a small agricultural, faraway, poor country. And the fact is that they won against the world superpower, America.
France. Well, first they won
France and then America. Okay, and was led by the same small group of people, and they developed the concept of revolutionary warfare. So definitely you cannot come up with the same amount of tanks and airplanes and submarines against America. So if I'll sum up in one sentence, which is very unacademic but very effective. General Giap had said, we fought the war against America more in the streets of Washington than the jungles of Vietnam. Okay, so meaning what they invented is a political type of warfare, meaning that the Viet Cong and their operatives were in charge of politics and military at the same time. In brackets, I would say that the IDF had a concept up until 2 years ago that you don't put politics into the army. Okay, so which is a tremendous limitation and it gives, on the other hand, gives to the other side.
I don't understand. We can go back to that for a second, but I'll just say parenthetically, I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, the IDF, what do you mean they said that they weren't going to have policies and they decided 2 years ago that they would?
Look, the concept was that you don't make, was the maxim. You don't
They don't bring propaganda into
No. You don't mix politics into the army. And this was, of course, a fraud, because the army always
armies in the world.
Yeah, I'm talking since the 50s. And then when the Likud came to power, it became stronger that you don't mix politics with the army, but was meant not right-wing politics, not right-wing politics.
You didn't let the government have any influence over the army.
Exactly. Exactly.
So it became very political. It became the political opposition to the government.
Exactly. To this day. But going back to Vietnam, they thought that the military local commander is in charge of politics as well.
Like a commissar in the Soviet Red Army.
Exactly. And then on and on. And now they decided the revolutionary warfare consists of a few stages. First of all, you start with the lowest level of operation in terms of violence. This is psychological warfare. You try to persuade. Now, how you try to persuade the enemy? You try to insert guilt feelings, and you try to lower its motivation. On further stages, when the black soldiers were more and more in the armed forces of the United States, so they would appeal to them through leaflets and loudspeakers and say, "Look, here you are a soldier, but at home you're a bloody nigger. Okay, so why would you die for such a government?" And that was true. They would quote statements from Alabama, political figures about it, and we're talking about the 60s. And that must have penetrated under the skin of the soldiers, because it's basically true. Because the percentage of black soldiers within the armed forces of the United States was disproportional.
Disproportionately high to the percentage in the overall population.
Exactly. And so they realized they were somehow manipulated. So, okay. And
did that have an impact on the battlefield, or was it more that the black nationalists turned against Vietnam? Martin Luther King was against Vietnam?
This is how the procedure was. I mean, I don't have, and maybe I don't know if anybody has a distinct proof, in terms of research results broken down by statistics and all that. But for me, it's obvious that it had an impact. Secondly, then you move up and you use terror. And you use terror against the supporters of the United States. And terror is the occasional, unintentional harm of individuals. Like you put a bomb in the street, you don't know who's going to be affected, you don't know who's going to be killed.
So it's like collateral damage?
No. It was intent for damage, but this is something which nobody knows when it's going to be. Like what the communists would kill one and frighten 1,000. Okay, and it was completely unintentional. You don't know. You never know who is going to be, and if it's a he or a she, if it's a low level or high level. This is just as it happens. Now that scares a lot.
Who was conducting the violence? The Americans or the Viet Cong?
No, the Viet Cong.
In their own villages.
No, in their own villages, they would kill the collaborators with America, or whom they would call a collaborator. Okay, and the purpose was to move the leadership of the village to the Viet Cong, even though it was in South Vietnam. All right, and then they would deploy terrorism in the cities, and America had shipped a lot of aid workers and civilians to support the military effort, even military dentists or doctors or whatever, and they were the target for assassination. That is guerrilla warfare. So you're moving higher on the violent scale, and then once they achieved that, they moved to physical warfare, the Tet Offensive, and all that. The interesting thing with the Tet Offensive is that militarily, America won.
Right.
But politically, the streets of Washington were boiling. And so what do we need it for? Okay, so they deployed a
So it made people at home feel like their actions were futile and there was no point to it all. It was just mindless killing instead of you're beating the enemy and you're succeeding.
Yeah. And especially when America went into damage what was called by McNamara the body counts, and see, which is, by the way, same is happening here now because we killed so many, and so, but it's completely ineffective. It's completely out. So then we come to this. It creates a mood. And the mood does not have to do anything with reality.
Right.
It's a mood. It's psychological perception. So we said, what have we lost here? What do we need it for? I mean, 10,000 miles away from America. Why? And that crept under the skin. And the Pentagon issued a 64 pages document to persuade the American soldiers why they are there and why it's important. And the domino effect and the harsh reality of communism and all that. But once you are in the jungle, in the mud, and you are always subject to sniping and stepping on a bungee sticks or whatever, on landmine, it creeps under your skin. And that, after 15 years, many, many casualties, a million and a half or whatever, is America pulled out. The idea that we can, distill from all this is driving a wedge and from asset to liability. Two main principles. Driving a wedge is to divide and conquer. Split your enemy into subgroup, and once the enemy does not have a cohesion grasp of itself, then it's very easy to go sector by sector and then change their perception.
So that's obviously what's happening with us with Hamas today. And I'll just, I just want to show the audience what we were talking about today. I don't usually look at Yediot Achronot because it's kind of this is a psychological warfare trash sheet to demoralize the public. What can I do? But they were giving it away free outside of the post office when I went to pick up my mail this morning. And since I was seeing as I was coming to meet with you, Ron, I figured, all right, why don't we show this in a sort of show and tell thing? So yesterday, the IDF videotaped the tunnel where the 6 hostages who were executed by Hamas
released. They videotaped it long ago.
The IDF did?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so
now they released it.
The IDF released to the public this tape or this video that they took of the IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari in the tunnel where the 6 hostages, Heroes Goldberg Polin, Alex Lobovnov, Carmel Gat, Ori Danino, Almog Sarusi, and Eden Yerushalmi were held and where they were executed. And showed, they were 20 meters below ground, below a child's bedroom. There was the entrance to the tunnel. You went down 4 long ladders to get to this dungeon, and they were in a very narrow, I think he said 110-meter tunnel area that you couldn't stand up in if you were a grown man, and they only had 2 mattresses that people could sleep on at once, and they were starved. And this is also the tunnel where they were executed. They had to pee into bottles, and they had a bucket that they did their other things in it. And it is not a place that's fit not for human life. It's not for animal life. It's not for cockroaches' life. And this is where they were held, and we're not quite sure for how long. And this is also where they were executed. So I was not clear why the IDF spokesman decided that they had to put it out. It looked to me like they were manipulating the public, because who is this for? Is it going to stop Hamas from doing this? No. Is it going to stop Hamas's supporters abroad who have rallied around Hamas? They rallied for Hamas on October 7th to suddenly care? No. So I wasn't sure why they did that in the first place, except the only audience, the people who truly care about the hostages are the Israelis. So it seemed like an act of demoralization. And then maybe they did it for the front page writer who definitely wants to demoralize the public in Yediot Ahronot, because this is what they put up. You can see it here. So this is the picture of the tunnel where they were. These are the blood stains where the 6 were executed. You can see the narrow nature of this tunnel. And here are the pictures of the 6 hostages who were murdered. And then it says here, the puddle of blood in the Hamas tunnel tells it all. Here, in conditions that no person is supposed to be able to exist within them or survive within them. This is where Hirsch, Eden, Ori, Carmel, Alex, and Almog lived and were murdered. And then the IDF spokesman says, more hostages are being held in these conditions. And then here on the bottom, the red headline, it's inhuman. Okay, so, I'm sure that, Yahya Sinwar probably looked at this headline and said, bullseye, right? And so first let's talk about Yahya Sinwar, and then maybe we can move to the Yediot Ahronot front page editor, because I think that there's a synergy here. But first let's talk about Hamas.
Okay.
Tell me, why did they release the execution videos after they killed the hostages? Why didn't they've released hostage videos, and they've done that before. They've released hostage videos. They had one of Noah Argamani and I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember the 2 other hostages she was held with, all 3 of them sitting together, and they all say the same things. In all of their hostage videos, they all say, we're here because Israel abandoned us, because Israel didn't protect us. It's all Netanyahu's fault. Netanyahu, go out and rally against Netanyahu and make him make a deal. That's the text. They all have to say it, and they all say it. And so the 3 of them said it, and then I think very shortly after the video was released, and there was another video like this also, they announced that the 2 men were killed, and they're always killed in IDF bombings. They're never executed. They're always killed in IDF bombings. And of course, we've recovered bodies which were shot, and they were not killed by airstrikes. But they're all the same. So it was here, the IDF recovered the bodies, and then Hamas released 6 videos of the 6 of them pleading for their lives with the same text that we've been hearing since the original videos started appearing. And so why does Hamas do that? Why don't they just put them on and then let us do something? Why is it first we get them, we find out that they've been executed, and then they release them?
There are the 2 main principles that they go through the concept of psychological warfare. One is creating an opportunity, and one is exploiting an opportunity. Creating an opportunity is like the Gilad Shalit affair, the abduction affair. Okay, so they dragged the Israeli society through the mud for 5.5 years. And the main idea, according to my understanding of psychological warfare, was to erode the Israeli society cohesion. And they go, and they did it again in October 7, only 250 times more. Okay. Now, my personal perception of it, this is all run from Tehran. It's way too big for Sinwar to work such a huge operation. And it's a huge operation. They have collected all the information on every one of the abductees. They would send messages to the families, etc. It's a very big operation. So this is the creating an opportunity. Now, exploiting an opportunity is something which happens, and you change it in order to maximize psychological impact. Now, they could not in any way have let the IDF have the credit of freeing the hostages. So they had to be killed. Okay, now what do you do now? Okay, so in order to divert criticism, it's so they played it. So they play it. It's your fault. It's a strategy. It's all your fault. Had you not done what we said you should do, then everything would have been okay.
So that would explain then why the released hostages and the freed hostages that have come home attested, many of them, I don't know if all of them did, but certainly I've heard repeated stories from the released hostages saying that they were repeatedly videotaped. And
yes.
So and we have had, relatively speaking, very few of these videotapes released. But clearly Hamas has hundreds, if not thousands, of videotapes of the hostages,
right.
dead and alive. They show them both.
Right.
And they're waiting, and they use them when it's opportune.
Let me tell you something which I quoted in my book. I even have the picture of it. ISIS caught a Syrian army officer. They looked at his phone, and they saw that 2 days before that, he was getting a blessing, parting on the way from his mother. Very moving photograph. Was a big guy, very muscular, is bowing his head, and his mother is putting her hands on his head, is giving him the blessing. Okay? So what they did is they beheaded him with his camera filming, and then sent the photograph to his mother, and then to his contact list.
Oh, they did that on October 7th. They executed a grandmother on her Facebook page live.
Yeah, etc. But so this was, something on the field. They didn't have to compose any war doctrine of psychological warfare or war psychologically waged. What they did is just, impromptu on the field, very effective. And then, of course, they put the clip on social media. Okay, back to Hamas. Hamas and Iran have no boundaries. It's only thing if it's effective or not effective. Now here comes another dilemma on revolutionary warfare and in psychological warfare. How do you not over-yank the chain? All right, because if you pull the chain too hard, your enemy will freak out and will use all his might in order, and you don't want that. You don't want it. You want to use the enemy to condition him to, suffer small blows at a time and very gradually increase the scale and the intensity of those strikes until he finds himself in such a way that the only way out is to give up, is to surrender. Okay, so the Hamas would not execute them live because that would unite Israeli society in one blow, and Israel will wipe out Hamas in a carpet bombing in anger, and they don't want that. So they want to frustrate the IDF and the Israeli society and the political decision makers, and get them conditioned, acquainted, accustomed to the situation where Hamas is in control and the enemy, us, is obedient. Okay, so that's how it works. So it's only they strike a very balanced, very adin.
Very delicate balance.
Delicate balance of how to operate and how to use the information. Okay. Now back to the IDF. The IDF is advertising, is publishing this information, letting it out. Okay, and it has a consideration of unifying the Israeli society, behind the IDF, Or if you want to push the paranoia gland or the paranoia button, maybe they want to direct the Israeli decision makers, the political decision makers, towards a deal, because the public is frustrated. This is obvious. Now, when they see these images, they are very frustrated. Now, the question is, what will they do with the frustration? And here comes the ingenuity of Hamas and Tehran, and directing this frustration towards the government, towards Netanyahu. Okay? If you had agreed before that to the deal that Hamas was not offering, the Hamas was offering, then they wouldn't have these images. Now, they need to balance these two impacts. And I guess Hagari and the IDF spokesperson unit were considering that they'll win both ways. They'll win the unification of Israeli society, together with pressuring the government towards a deal. Now, why would the army be interested in a deal? And the army usually is interested in war and not in stopping a war. But in the Israeli case, I guess it's different. And this is my take on the current information now.
I mean, I look at this. I don't mean to interrupt, but I look at this. I looked at the video yesterday evening, and I'm looking at this horrific photograph on all over, emblazoned on the front page of Yediot Ahronoth, and it actually, both of them enraged me because it. Here, I'm covering it because I don't want to look at it anymore. It enraged me because it's cultivating a sense of.
By the way, if I may interject. If you deal with psychological warfare, you have to be very rational and don't let your feelings impact you.
But my feelings are impacting me because I'm enraged, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, why are you demoralizing us? Why are you using the images that Hamas created on purpose, deliberately? Everything here was created. Why would you do this if you want our side to win? And if you don't want our side to win, why are you in the army? I mean, to me, I look at it and it feels to me like we're these kinds of videos and this kind of a front page in Yediot Ahronoth, they're absolutely on the same side as the people who created these images, who are the murderers in Hamas, and that enrages me because I think to myself, why are you doing this? Don't you understand the stakes? We're in a nation that's in a war for our survival. Why would you be preaching demoralization? I find it shocking, and I'm wondering whether they've just been demoralized or whether let me go back. Delete what I just said. I mean, how do we handle that? This is like, first of all, indication that Hamas has succeeded. And second of all, they have divided Israeli society between people like Caroline Glick, who look at this and are enraged, and people who look at this and go out to Hasidic Square or to the Kiryat, to the IDF headquarters, or outside of the prime minister's office and demand that we capitulate to Hamas. So they did. They did manage to evoke emotional responses, either for capitulation or for war. But then, see, my anger is directed, again, towards somebody inside of Israel, right? It's directed towards the newspaper editor, and it's directed towards the IDF spokesman.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So we're all playing it.
Everybody has an agenda. Each and every one of us has an agenda. You have an agenda of spreading your word. I want to sell my book. And the Yediot Ahronoth newspaper has to sell copies.
Well, they were giving this away.
No, okay. Now, the main bulk of their earnings is on Ynet. So the more people go into that, Very few people hold the paper anymore, in the physical paper in their hands. So they go into Ynet, and this is what most Israelis are doing, let's face it. And they want to sell copies or click bites or whatever these days. It's the same thing. Now, if you can sell click bites and pursue your personal political views at the same time, the more the better. I would say that they would do that even though it would be against their political views. They would still advertise it, but the click bites or advertising spaces and time is the utmost desire of the media. So if the media is depending on us, and if we consume the media, we have nobody to complain to. We support the media. In this case, I think it helped everyone. It sells papers. It helps Hamas. It unifies the Israeli public.
Does it unify us or does it divide us?
Okay, first of all, the foundation layer is that it unifies Israeli society. Now, and there's anger. Now, the question is what can be done with this anger? Now, here's come the ingenuity of Hamas in directing much of the Israeli anger against the government. And this is pure gold psychological warfare strategy. Okay? And this is how you win a war. Now, it doesn't mean that they will win eventually, but this is a major victory for Hamas. And for the findings, I don't know if they left it on purpose or they just fled away, and the unit which entered the tunnel saw that, filmed that as part of, a battle procedure, and then sent it back to headquarters, and then they held it for as long as at headquarters. They held it in Amman, in the military intelligence or the military spokesperson unit. They held it for use whenever they see fit. Sometimes they miscalculate, sometimes they win. It depends. You can never satisfy everyone, especially in the polarized Israeli society. But Israeli society is polarized for the past 3-4 months. And before that, you could say that most of Israeli society is pretty much united against the Hamas. Now we can move to understand how you divide and rule, how you drive a wedge within Israeli society.
Why don't we talk about how you drive a wedge? Because, like you said, until about 3 or 4 months ago, we were unified, and then
yes.
And then we started getting the renewal of the anti-government demonstrations and the accusing Netanyahu of actually carrying out Hamas's crimes, etc. That began, and it reached full flower a couple of weeks ago, and hasn't really done much. But then we just got an adrenaline rush for them with the execution videos. So how did that work? How was the wedge? How were they able to induce a wedge? Was it Hamas or was it the opposition that's getting tired of the government surviving? I mean, how is that wedge driven into society? And then the last question we'll ask is, how do we win? How do we get over this? How do we render these psychological warfare operations ineffective? So those are the two questions.
Okay, all right. So first of all, it didn't start 4 months ago. The splitting the Israeli society in two started in 1978.
All right.
Okay, the New Israel Fund was created a few months after Begin came to power. Begin government came to power.
And that's that's a far left American organization that tries to. That works to splinter Israeli society.
Yeah, to undermine the Israeli.
And here I just want to add a caveat, just a little thing, which is just that I think in Matrochin, or it was either in Ain Pachepa, the head of the Romanian KGB.
Pachepa, Johan Mihai Pachepa.
Right, who defected to the United States. It was either in his book or in the Matrokin memoirs, documents, the archive, that the point was made that the Soviets viewed psychological warfare or their operations or political operations in the Third World as and the Palestinians are very much part of that, as a means to defeat the West by compelling Westerners, United States and Israel principally actually, to doubt the morality of their cause. So that once you doubt the morality of your cause, you're unable, as you were mentioning in the Vietnam War, for instance, as a paradigmatic example of this in action, then you can't win it. And here, it's not so much that people doubt the morality of Israel's fight against Hamas. It's just, like, I don't think that if you went to Hostage Square and you said, do you like Hamas? Do you think the Hamas are the good guys? You would get 100% of the people there, even on the farthest left, reaches of the people demonstrating, saying absolutely not. They're pure evil. And in theory, they would agree that they have to be destroyed. And then if you ask them, then why are you demonstrating against the government? Why aren't you directing your anger at Hamas? They would say, what? What is the answer? What have they come to believe, or what did they believe beforehand that they've then, sort of clawed onto what they were, that basic insight that, Hamas is bad and has to be destroyed?
Okay, to that, it's a very simple psychological warfare technique. It's called demonization. And what they did was to isolate Netanyahu and make him the utmost devil. And that's been done for about over a decade. And it's only now, it's the peak of the campaign. It's so Netanyahu is the devil, and devil needs to be destroyed. At all costs, at all measures, even undermining his son's wedding or whatever, not letting him sleep. Okay. So this demonization. Secondly, how you penetrate Israeli society is through a brilliant communist invention called a front organization. Front organization, you establish an organization within enemy territory. You place people who are of high prestige among the enemy. You control it by controlling its funding and etc. And then they recruit their friends and believers, people who really want to do good. Shalom Achshav is a people.
Peace Now.
Peace Now had many supporters, just like Four Mothers, who preached a retreat from Lebanon in the 2000s. They really believe that it should be done, and they're going to think. But what they don't realize that they're being operated by someone else, which far more insidious intentions. The PLO. We have more and more documents and reports saying that the Soviets not only supported the PLO but created the PLO in the beginning of the 1960s as a part of the Cold War. If Israel is with America, so we are with Egypt, and we create a conflict that would divert the Israeli efforts, undermine America's ally in the Middle East. And today, our boys and girls are fighting in order to, which is a very depressing thought. They are part of a global conflict, which America and Russia. And because 60 years ago they were a part of of global considerations, the part of the Cold War. So the Cold War is returning. So the Soviets are supporting it's not the Soviets now, it's the Iranians, and the Iranians are with alliance with the Russians. And so they are the thorn at our sides and in this terrible battle. And also, I feel pity for the Palestinians in this way. They're being indoctrinated to hate us and to die for this hatred, willing to die for this hatred. For what? Because we're part of a global conflict between two superpowers. But anyway, it's too late now because they really believe that we are devils and we should be annihilated. Okay. So now, how you penetrate the Israeli society? What you create front organizations. You go into the academia, and with very large donations, you create think tanks and you create research institutes within the academia. The academia, when the government paid less, it paid the university less and less, so they relied on more and more contributions. So here comes this foundation, the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation from Germany, endless amounts of money, and why don't you open up a research center for women's rights? Okay, so women's rights, feminism is is a noble cause. Yeah, but they forgot to mention that the Rosa Luxemburg is a strong communist Marxist organization based in Germany, and they keep their agenda, on the table all the time. So generations of Israeli students have learned that women are oppressed all over, especially in Judaism. And so they need to go out and break the old establishment. Now, the old establishment is not just the rabbinical establishment, it's the patriarchal establishment. And you confuse them until they don't know where they are. Now here comes another organization. It says, you're frustrated? Aha, let me give you an outlet. Bilin.
What?
Bilin.
Oh, yeah.
Bilin.
Building the wall in Bilin.
Yeah. Bilin is a village between Modi'in and Yehuda and Sharon, the West Bank. We led to believe that if we'll build a wall, that will protect us. So they had to protest against the
security perimeter,
security perimeter, whatever you call it, the apartheid wall, etc.
But they called it the apartheid wall.
Right. And then you take this youth, the students, and you bring them over to the Friday morning demonstrations. And then comes the border police. And so they start to breathe in tear gas and be pushed and then and even taken, to the for a short arrest period. This is how you radicalize the students, and this has been going on for 20 years. So this is how it's orchestrated. It's orchestrated, and of course you need to find Israeli counterparts. And who is better counterpart than those who have been deposed from politics by the current government? Okay, so this is the general overview, and basically, if I'll sum it up, you channel the energy with the existing energy towards your own goals. And this is the summit, the acme of psychological warfare. To do what your enemy is forcing you to do, even though you know it's against your own better interest. This is why we pulled out of Lebanon.
Right.
This is why we pulled out of Gaza, the disengagement. And lots of psychological warfare done that. And
when you add to that the international media, right? I mean, I think I read a headline this week. I think it said something to the effect of, on the BBC, Israel is accused of genocide, something like that, something like 5 times more than the Palestinians.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that there's this constant drumbeat of this blood libel, and it's going on all the time. Why is the BBC? Why? I mean, it's a very odd thing, that people have just embraced these lies, and they're pushing them out into the bloodstream to the point where you can't even begin to have a conversation with a reporter because they're operating on the basis of just lies.
Let me tell
have a conversation with them.
Let me tell you a quick anecdote that happened to me. I wanted to do my PhD on propaganda in the early 90s, and the Jerusalem University on Mount Scopus is my alma mater.
Hebrew U. Yeah.
Sorry. And nobody wanted to supervise me.
Right.
It was the heyday of the Oslos, and we were, it's a new period in human history where old enemies are, being reconciled. And so I went to England. So I went to university, very good university, and, it's on public. It was Leeds in northern England. And it's the second largest university in terms of communication, media studies, etc. And I found a supervisor who was brave enough to mention the word propaganda at the time. And I went there, spent 4 years. And the second week that I came, the secretary says to me, you should meet Howard. He's the head of the documentary department in the School of Communication. So I went to Howard. You're from Israel, very interesting. I've done 7 series for the BBC and Channel 4 on the Middle East. So I said, oh, really? So you're very well informed. So yes, I am. I've looked into the matter. I've done, and teaching was his second career. His first career was, documentary filming. So we said, how did you get into the subject? He says, in the 70s, I was going on a fact-finding tour in Lebanon. Oh. Okay. So the effort to conscript students, and not from the medical faculties, not from the accounting faculties, because they're going to be bourgeois, and not from the active, radical, those who want to change the world. So they took students from philosophy and from communications and from these filming and arts, and showed them the results of Israeli bombing of the refugee camps in southern Lebanon. Now, what happened there? What happened there that 5 years before that, they were trained by the North Vietnamese. And what the North Vietnamese trained them is that you need to promote a feeling, a sense of guilt inside your enemy. So how do you build that? So you cause the enemy to harm your own people. Now, this is the first time in history. I mean, collateral damage has always been, inseparable part of warfare. But it's the first time in history, to the best of my knowledge, where you encourage the enemy to harm your own people as a part of your strategy. And so to use that.
We don't have too much time left, so I'll just give you 1.5 minutes. Just kidding. But, just the last few minutes to explain. All right, we're in a world where people have been conditioned, even our own people,
yes,
and very important and powerful forces inside of Israeli society, including our own media, as we saw in Yediot this morning and yesterday morning, etc. To believe the enemy propaganda, to internalize their lies, and to ignore the overwhelming truth in order to cause a collapse of our will to fight. And we saw this in Vietnam. We've seen this in just since then, basically every conflict that the West has engaged in, we've seen it play out in various forms. How do you stop it? How do you defeat this? I mean, it's so insidious. What do you do? Where's the vaccine for the AIDS virus that they're putting into our
First of all, we need to know the rules of engagement in psychological warfare.
You mean two can tango? So you mean that both sides can play this game, not just that?
Yeah, no. But in order to inoculate your enemy and in order to prepare yourself to do that, you have to undergo a very, very thorough process of learning. So we need to, this is what I've been trying to do in the past few decades in order to say, look, this is how it's done. These are the new rules of engagement. So why don't we use it? It's much less violent. The trouble is that we're fighting, or this is a different conversation for the future. Why actually we don't do that? But what we are discussing now is what can be done. We need to better understand the Arabs, which we don't, even though but a few Israelis speak Arabic, even though it's not territorial Arabic, it's not cultural Arabic, it's academic Arabic. And that's not Arabic. You can speak it, you can read it, you can write it, but you don't understand it. And we have lost the generation of people who grew up in Arab countries 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and they would have taught us what, it's not the same as living it, but they would have taught us what it is really like, but nobody listened to them. Right. That's a problem. There is a guy called Harold Rode who worked for 28 years in the State Department on the Middle East, a genius in understanding Arab and Middle Eastern cultures. Speaks Turkish, but just like Bernard Lewis.
No. Yeah, he's Bernard Lewis' disciple, and he's a very close friend of mine. So, Harold, we're talking about you. Hi, I'm sure you're watching, right? We'll have to have you on the show. Don't worry, we'll have you on soon. And I think he's been on other shows at JNS.
And so, I mean, he's also been frustrated that nobody in the State Department were willing to listen to him. This is for a different conversation, why and how. But he wrote a very, very concise book about the Islamic way of war. And it's in one line, this summary. You can win against the Islam in on two outcomes. One is you create so much damage to the Islamic society and army that they have no other choice, or you shame them. If you shame them, and shame in the Arab world is worse than death. Now we need to know how to do that, and that's an art. And
it ought to be easy, given the atrocities that they perpetrated against us and continue to perpetrate against us since October 7th. How I mean, even before that, obviously, since Hamas was established in 1988, all they do is atrocities. Can't you? I mean, now that doesn't cause them shame, is what you're saying. They make
on the contrary, it gives them proud. It makes them proud. It's we've been killing far more than they have been killing us, but we didn't film them.
That makes them happy, also.
We didn't film it and we didn't use it because it's immoral.
Use it, and then the Americans told us to stop. They said we weren't allowed to show the footage of the Hamas terrorists surrendering to us in undershirts and underwear. That's what they said. They said it was too embarrassing. We weren't allowed to do it anymore, and it was very effective when we were using it.
That came inside Israel.
The United States told us to stop.
Okay. All right. So, so we need to play within the constraints of, a foreign superpower, which is actively intervening in our day-to-day conduct of the war. We all wait for November 20th to see 5th. When things might change. It won't change in a day, but this at least that aspect will be taken off. But we need to change our perception of psychological warfare. It's cheap. It's more moral. It is more effective, and it could really save lots of lives on our side and on the enemy's side. And I don't know about peace. This is going to be a religious discussion, but definitely some sort of coexistence. That would be only psychological warfare. Campaign with this high, fully funded, fully thought out, long time. That's the only way.
Well, I hope that this conversation will cause more people to listen to you, because I think you're right. And I think that when one side is doing it, and like you said, they have no boundaries, they have no shame, only what's effective for them, including the way that they, envision our future as all being dead. I think that it's very important for us to stop and think this through and not play their game, because I fear that, or I'm convinced actually, that headlines, front pages like this, and even the way that the IDF spokesperson put out that video, I think that those are own goals. Those are things that we're doing to ourselves. They do this, but then the question is how we respond. And I think that we're responding in devastating ways. And we would be very well advised to read your books and to listen to you. And I appreciate you coming on the show today to share some of this very critical information. So you're saying it all started in Vietnam, huh?
It all started in Vietnam.
So we're still losing the Vietnam War.
Yes, in a sense we do.
And what's so funny about that is, of course, that the United States actually won it on the ground in many ways, but nobody knows and nobody cares because
it doesn't matter. The victory on the ground, yes, it doesn't matter. The victory on the ground, it's not it's the political. And this is what the communists have understood long ago. And this is how today with social media, which makes it so much easier to do, they dictate the rules of engagement. And we should be very alert to that. And that would save our lives.
Fight back on this territory.
Fight back.
I mean, we know psychology, but we're letting other people use it against us. All right. Well, I thank you very much. We're going to have to stop this conversation, but maybe we'll have another one soon about why it is that we're not fighting, because I think that it's sort of required after we've explained why we must. So we should explain why we're not.
Yes.
And then move on from there, and then begin to do so. Right. So maybe we'll have three. Maybe this will be the first of 3 conversations. Anyway, you'll certainly be invited back. Thank you very much. And guys, we'll talk to you later. We have another In Focus coming up this week as well. So stay tuned, stay on this space, and we'll be back. And thanks again, Ron, for coming.
Thanks very much for having me, Caroline.
Yeah. All right.